Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Today at T-Mobile, I'm joined by a special co-anchor.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Snoop Deal Double G.
Snoop, where can people go to find great deals?
Head to T-Mobile.com and get 4 iPhone 16s with Apple Intelligence on us, plus 4 lines for $25.
That's quite a deal, Snoop. And when you switch to T-Mobile, you can save versus the other big guys' comparable plans plus streaming.
Respect. We up out of here.
See how you can save on wireless and streaming versus the other big guys at T-Mobile.com/switch. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
We passed over a destroyed land. You have not seen it, do not know what hell looks like. We can have today only one purpose, and that is to see this thing through to the end.
Meanwhile, in the Ardennes, the Americans have recaptured the initiative, moving step by step back over the lost ground.
I had gone up to see the attack on Bastogne. It was launched in hours creep over the ice from Luxembourg. It was a hard, stark thing. The wind swept over the broken trees along the roads and the armour in the fields. Even the tanks that had been hastily smeared with white paint stood out in sharp relief, cold and naked. The troops built little fires of anything that would burn, even within sight of the enemy, to try to warm themselves. The infantry fought down one hill and up the next. The tanks were not much good then, except as artillery. The dead lay frozen and still when the men came to load them in trucks. They picked them up like big logs of wood. The frozen arms and legs got in their way when they were piling them. But everyone who had come through the summer before commented on how nice it was that the battlefield didn't stink. That was Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Ingersoll summing up the aftermath of battle in the Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne. And welcome to episode 8 of We Have Ways of Making You Talk series about the Battle of the Bulge. And it's been...
Yep, and this is the episode where we put all the loose bits together and... recap on those numbers of...
At least that's what we're going to try to do. I'm sure people will be relieved to know that we are now on to the 23rd of December, 1944. Having basically
that all goes by in a rush.
Spent 7 episodes on the first 7 days of the offensive. Because, I mean, this is the thing. The things that tip the balance happen really early, don't they? In the same way, in a way that in 1940, the Ardennes offensive, the things that happen early tip the balance in favour of the Germans. In this Ardennes offensive, the things that tip the balance against the Germans happen early too. When time is of the essence and you run out of time, you're banjaxed, aren't you?
You're already in the shtuck. Anyway, if it sounds a bit odd today, A, I've got a cold, B, I'm in Liverpool.
Those two unrelated.
I'm staying in the Beatles hotel, but I'm not here on a Beatles tour. Obviously, I'm here on Battle of Atlantic stuff, and it's been horrendous. But if it sounds a little bit different, that's why.
Okay, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. It's a harsh winter that's got to you there, Jim, with the cold.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was biting cold on the Mersey last night. I can tell you. Anyway, one thing we haven't really talked about is air power.
Yeah,
and that's because in the first few days of it doesn't really come into play at all because the weather's so bad. And despite Hitler's promise of 2,000 Luftwaffe fighter planes and Me-262 jets, etc., of course, none of them really came. In fact, just 170 sorties were flown on the first day of the Battle of the Bulge, and only 600 on the 17th of December by the Luftwaffe. Yeah. And a sortie is an individual combat flight. Yep. So 170 different planes are in the air at different times, but obviously quite often flying more than one mission over the course of the day. And the plan for the Luftwaffe had been to keep at least 150 fighters up in the air as an umbrella the whole time. But of course, this just didn't happen at all. I mean, this was as sort of much fantasy as anything else. And as the battle progresses, there's even less and less of the Luftwaffe to be seen over the battlefield.
Yeah. And the thing to bear in mind, of course, is this: if we are relating it to the 1940 Ardennes offensive, this isn't that Luftwaffe by any stretch of the imagination, is it?
Very much not.
Because after all, the big advantage the 1940 Luftwaffe had is that they'd got the jump on everyone in terms of tactical air power, having worked it out. They'd done the research, they'd trained it, they'd conceived it, conceptualized it, they'd trained for it, and they used it. But in the meantime, they've been caught up with.
Well, and also there was no air defence system over France or the Low Countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Or indeed Poland or Norway or Denmark. The defending air forces back in 1940 just had to sort of take off and hope that they bumped into some Luftwaffe, whereas the Luftwaffe could plan when they were going to hit them, and 9 times out of 10 hit their enemy on the ground before they'd had a chance to break up. That's not in existence anymore. By now there is radar, and there is radar and ground control at every level of the Allied air forces, and indeed of the Germans as well, of course. It means that A, the enemy can see you coming, and B, you've got this problem that they're just not experienced anymore. I mean, they're very, very undertrained. They're going to frontline squadrons with kind of 90 hours or less in total, which is just nothing. In the Battle of Britain, they were going in with 170 minimum, and quite a lot of them a considerably huge amount more. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Whereas, by contrast, the Allies are super trained, super well experienced, super led, have the very best machines, and once they do get into the air, it's pretty one-sided. And that comes on the days the sky's clear on the 23rd of December.
Yeah, but in the same way that the Luftwaffe are held up by the weather, so are the Allies. So they're not flying very many sorties either in the first week. They managed like 450 daily during the first week.
Yes, and just to give you some more numbers,
go on.
It's the 9th Tactical Air Command and the 19th Tactical Air Command, part of the US 9th Air Force, which is the Tactical Air Force. So the 8th Air Force, the mighty 8th, is still back in East Anglia, bombers coming over and all the rest of it. But for the most part, this is tactical support, and this is ground attacks, air to ground attacks and shooting stuff up. This is what the Germans would call Jarbos, fighter bombers. And they're flying a lot, 23rd of December. Bombers are also coming over and hitting the rear areas. So this is the medium bombers, twin engine bombers, B-25s, B-26s, this kind of thing. But on the 23rd of December, to be fair, 624 medium bombers come over, attack the German rear, and 35 are shot down at 182 damage. So that's pretty.
That's pretty steep, isn't it?
That is quite steep. And that's because they're flying in. They're flying in fast and low. Yeah. There's not much room for manoeuvre, and easier to hit if you're lower, obviously, from light flak. But by Christmas Eve, so the 24th of December, the 8th Air Force is then brought in and flies 1,400 sorties. So 1,400 bombers come over. And that sounds much more impressive because, that is a single force coming over in one dollop, effectively. And they hit 12 Luftwaffe airfields in and around the Rhine area. 4 airfields get off quite lightly, but 8 of them are out of action for the next 8 days.
I mean, that really shows you, when you consider 2 years before this, 1,000 bomber raid is a headline event, right? And it's a sign that the Allies have got their act together, political action as much as the strategic, because the strategic bombing is political in its content. The fact that you can improvise a 1,400 bomber force,
isn't that amazing?
Isn't it? It's absolutely amazing what the Allied air effort can do now.
Well, it really is. And if you think that, on day one of the battle, the Luftwaffe flies 170 sorties. On Christmas Day, the Allies fly 6,194. Of which 4,281 are fighter sorties. And our old friend, Oberst, he's now General, General Major Major Ludwig Heilmann, Mad King Ludwig, now commanding the 5th Fallschirmjäger Division. He said, enemy aircraft left an uninterrupted trail of burning vehicles extending like a torchlight procession from Bastogne all the way to the West Wall. In my opinion, the Ardennes offensive was irretrievably lost when the Allies sent their air forces into action on the 25th of December. A fact even the simplest soldier realized. Even an idiot understood that.
Even an idiot. Yeah. I mean, he's saying
that's basically his implication, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and after all, even the corporal in charge might have worked this out by now. I mean, that's an air effort on a par with Falaise, though, isn't it? The Falaise Gap battle.
Yeah, definitely. That makes it very, very difficult to manoeuvre in daylight. Now, obviously, you've got less daylight and more darkness, so that's okay. But basically, during the hours of daylight, if you try and put your nose out from behind that wood, you're in big trouble.
And also, by Christmas Eve, by Christmas, the Germans have stopped going forward, really, haven't they? So they're static, so you know where they are, as well as their other problem.
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's not like they're a mobile thing, and you've got to pick out who they must be, and it's all figured out by this stage, isn't it, from the American perspective?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But also, they're shooting down enemy planes as well. So the Allies shoot down 718 German planes between the 17th to 27th of December, 346 between the 23rd and 27th of December, and 106 on Christmas Eve alone.
Yeah. But for a loss of 111 to fighters, of their own aircraft fighters, and 307 from flak. So there's still, yes, it's air superiority, but it still involves a great deal of friction and cost. In a way that's emblematic of this stage of the war is, yes, you're winning, yes, you're overwhelming, yes, you're suffocating the enemy, but you still are taking blows, you still are vulnerable yourselves.
Well, largely because it's so dangerous doing ground attack stuff, because there's a lot of flak about, and it's very, you're not really, they're losing 111, hardly any of them to German fighters, but the 307 are from flak. In the big show, Pierre Klosterman, he talks about just how dangerous it is and the kind of sort of debilitating losses.
Yeah.
But there is one last big air show to come, but we'll get to that a little bit later on in this episode. But what we should talk to now is the sort of German high watermark of this whole offensive. As we've already discussed, it doesn't come in the 6th Panzer Army area, which is in the sort of northern half of the Bulge. It's in the northern half of 5th Panzer Army sector, which is nominally in the middle. And this is the area it's north of Bastogne, south of 1st SS Panzer Corps, really, little south of kind of St. Vit, and beyond Houffalize. Yeah. That's the area we're talking about. Lovely, beautiful area of Belgium. And it's led by the 2nd Panzer Division and the Panzer Lehr and the 9th Panzer Division as well, which is not to be confused with the 9th SS Panzer Division. It's those 3 divisions, but it is very much the 2nd Panzer Division that's in the lead. Yeah. And for those who were listening to the Bastogne episode, you may remember that it was the 2nd Panzer who came in and then skirted around the top of Bastogne and pushed on. Panzer Lehr got a bit stuck in. They kept a battle group behind and then pushed round to the south and moved on. So that's who we're talking about here. And on the 21st of December, the 2nd Panzer Division reaches the River Ourthe at Ourtheville, and Panzer Grenadiers follow on the following day. And that's sort of, it's west of Bastogne, northwest of Bastogne, probably, I don't know, a dozen miles, something like that. Yeah. But then on the 22nd, 2nd Panzer then has to halt because it's not got enough fuel. God. You can't get the fuel through the forests, on these terrible roads, on these terrible tracks. It can't get it there quick enough. No. This is a sort of fatal flaw in the whole. Well, many fatal flaws in the whole thing, but this is one of the bigger ones, is how do you actually sort of keep it all going? How do you keep the speed, when you haven't got a Zillmann Zeg commanding the operations of Panzer Corps Kleist as you did in 1940, with fuel dumps and trucks going on. It's just that everything is so much harder in winter. You haven't got command of the skies.
Well, and also when you are running on fumes anyway. It's a time of plenty in 1940. There's one attack to be delivered on, and that's Falgelb. You're not also fighting on the Eastern Front, or their effort went into 1940. It was in 1944. This is already diluted. I mean, the further we get into this, the more you think, God knows what those planning meetings are like. With all the officers privy to this, thinking, well, this can't work.
No, it's just bonkers, isn't it?
We're being served up for dinner here.
Anyway, by the 23rd of December, 2nd Panzer Division is on the move again, and it's now split into 2 march columns. So one is to a town called Marche, and the other is to Hargimont, which is a few miles to the south. And this is still a few miles from the River Meuse. I mean, they still haven't got to the River Meuse. I mean, by the time you're in Hargimont and Marche, you're still not there. Yeah. It's another sort of 6 to 8 miles away. Yeah. So General Lutwitz, who you may remember is the Corps commander, he's with the divisional spearhead and sacks the regimental commander of the leading formation for being too slow. when they come up against what he considers to be a weak US roadblock.
Yeah.
And Hargemont is captured quite quickly, but Marsh is not. It's defended by the newly arrived 84th Rail Splitters Division. I first came across when I was doing my Brothers in Arms book, the Sherwood Rangers, because they were there in that November battle that they were involved with. So they're comparatively new to the ETO, but they've had this battle in November, which has been pretty hard fought, and now here they are, come to kind of sort of rescue the day and blunt the 2nd Panzer Division. Anyway, Luttwitz now orders the bulk of 2nd Panzer Division to head straight for Dinant, which is on the Meuse, and this is the home to the saxophone. So when you go to Dinant, there's also saxophones all over the place, sculptures of them, because Monsieur Sax
is from there. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But the thing about Dinant is when you get there, it's, the actual town, there's a bridge over and everything, that's okay. But then either side of that, it then gets into sort of cliffs, and particularly just to the north of Dinant, there's these cliffs. They must be, I don't know, 100, 200 foot high, something like that.
Sort of a gorge.
And the Meuse is a big old beast. Right. I mean, 75 metres across, something like that.
Right.
It's not small, so you need that bridge. But of course, on the other side of the bridge, a 30 Corps.
Yeah, who've been rushed down and are ready. There's that famous photo, isn't there, of a firefly in Dinant, I think. Yeah.
Which they used on the front of David Render's book.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So 2nd Panzer is ordered to just go hell for leather for Dinant, but Luttwitz, the Corps commander, is hoping that 9th Panzer Division is going to quickly arrive. And so that they've got kind of, another column of panzers that can kind of hot-foot it to the River Meuse. But again, these panzer divisions are all split into battle groups. So leading the spearhead of 2nd Panzer Division is KG Böhm, which is Recce Battalion plus a handful of panzers, but mainly kind of armoured cars and whatnot. And on the night of the 23rd, 24th of December, Kampfgruppe Böhm races up the road towards Dinant, finally reaching the woods near Foy Notre Dame, which is, so they're pretty close. Yeah. And on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve, Kampfgruppe Kochenhausen, also of the 2nd Panzer Division, is also hot-footing it to the River Meuse, which is, just south of KG Böhm. Yeah. And by evening, on Christmas Eve, they're finally about a couple of miles away from the River Meuse. But they might as well be 100 miles.
Yeah.
They're not going to get across it.
Yeah. Well, this is well received in Berlin, isn't it? This is the hooray! We're nearly there.
Well, you're not really.
No.
Well, so 30 Corps have got there by the 23rd of December. So, they're already waiting for them with their 17-pounders and all the rest of it, and artillery and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, there's not a chance that they're going to be able to... And obviously they don't want to blow up the bridge because they're going to have to be able to use it themselves, the British, that is. So they're guarding it, and they've also sent over some people on the eastern side of it as well. So it's all pretty covered. So Mödel, who is the overall commander, Field Marshal Mödel, he urges 9th Panzer Division to get a move on and really hurry up and support 2nd Panzer. And he also orders 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, which was also in Italy and which is like the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division and has also just arrived. Absolutely no reconnaissance on the ground whatsoever. It's literally just arrived straight in to head to Bastogne to kind of help crush the resistance of those pesky Americans and Airborne and the 10th Armored Division, which is in there. But I think it's really important to stress that there is absolutely no strategic significance whatsoever of them reaching this high water mark. I mean, this is the furthest they get, and it's like...
It's a big nothing.
Great, well done. Here's your badge.
Yeah.
And the truth is already, the spearheads are absolutely exhausted. They've been on the go the whole time. Okay, so 2nd Panzer has a sort of slight day off when they're waiting for fuel. But I mean, they're knackered. They've been badly attrited. They're short of absolutely everything. They're a spent force. They're a busted flush. It doesn't actually seem that apparent to either Hitler or the Allies at that point. But it is an absolute so what moment. Yeah. But it looks alarming on a map if you're in Schaef. Or quite impressive if you're in Berlin, depending on which way you look at it.
I mean, if you're there on the ground, if you're Luttwitz, you know exactly what the state of play is. You know really.
Yeah, completely.
They've had to stop anyway because they haven't got fuel. The day they do stop and get a break is because they haven't got fuel. The whole thing's hobbled, isn't it? And the skies are cleared, as we've pointed out. So
yeah. So they're getting hammered the whole time now. And I think it's really important to understand that these Kampfgruppers that are kind of pushing forward, they might look like two fingers, but the Allies are not meeting the tip of the finger. No. They're coming down the side of the finger. Yeah. So they're coming from the north, effectively, and sweeping down on top of the strung-out Panzer Division. But, of course, they are strung out, but they're also operating in battle groups, so they're separated from the rest of the division. So Kampfgruppe Kochenhausen, for example, or Kampfgruppe Böhm, they're in their own little area, and they're very easy for the Allies at this point to come in behind them, particularly since this village of Marsh, this sort of large village of Marsh, small town of Marsh, hasn't been captured. So one of Kampfgruppe Kochenhausen's panzer columns is completely wiped out in the pre-dawn as it runs straight into a column of Combat Command A of the 2nd Armoured Division. Yeah. Hell on wheels. So you've got Hell on Wheels coming down. You've also got the 335th Infantry Regiment of 3 battalions from the 84th Rail Splitters Division.
Yep.
So they're then cutting in behind the rear of 2nd Panzer and threatening the main supply road. So as you can see, it's all going completely badly wrong for 2nd Panzer already, and the worst hasn't happened at this point. On the night of the 24th of December, a single captured Jeep with 3 German scouts approaches the main bridge at Dinant, but is hit by a mine laid by the British. And that's that.
Yep.
By Christmas Eve, KG Cockenhausen is now near the village of Celle, which I had a look around before you got over to the Ardennes the other day. Yep. Beautiful little thing on a hill, leading into the village. Away from the roads is this lovely valley and woods on either side, and it's in these woods that KG Cockenhausen is now desperately trying to get some cover from Allied air attacks and Yarbos, but also not to be spotted by the marauding men of Hell on Wheels. It's just a nonsense, isn't it? 3 RTR, British 3rd Tank Regiment, is also now advancing across the Meuse, so they've come from the west across the ridge at Dinant and moving west. Later on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve, 2 Panthers are knocked out against 3 RTR roadblocks at Celle. Also this day, the bulk of the 2nd Armoured Division, Hell on Wheels, enters the fray. So suddenly you've got a fresh armoured division of Americans plus a tank battalion of the British coming up against a panzer division that has been attrited all the way from the West Wall and is now kind of 60 miles in or whatever and is about to be absolutely hammered, which is what happens. KG Berm is also stopped. That's just a little bit further north of Cockenhausen, and that's stopped when it comes under attack from 3rd RTR as well. On the far side of the river, Firefly shoots up the leading Panzer IV. Boom, that's that. And around the same time, Task Force B of Combat Command B of Hell on Wheels turns southwest from the village of Siney and cuts in south of KG Cockenhausen, while Task Force A of CCB moves around from the north. So KG Cockenhausen is now completely surrounded and stuck in these woods, which is just on the edge of the village of Celle. And there they are. And when I was there, I was just thinking, God, I wish I had a metal detector. It's amazing.
All of this is showing how do you let them get across the Meuse? This is going to happen to them anyway. The whole thing is completely, because after all, this is a titanic, epic battle with a huge struggle and everything. But it also very much smells of a foregone conclusion. And that the Americans, however the Americans decide to go about it, is more the question here. That the initiative lies with the Americans. How do we deal with this? Rather than, there's no initiative with the Germans. They've just got to go forward. When they do, they simply offer more flank. They spread themselves out. They offer more vulnerability to the Americans. Whatever they do, the Germans, these divisions are divided into Kampfgruppe, so they're all stretched out. They're atomized, so you can defeat them in detail. It's like the Gazala Line battle in reverse, where Rommel goes around picking off bits of 8th Army and destroying them as he should so choose, right? It's got that flavour from the American perspective, hasn't it?
Yeah, and, the point is the leading spearheads of 2nd Panzer Division are being surrounded and just basically destroyed, and there's nothing they can do about it because they're cut off. They're cut off from their supply line. So it's, if they can't fight their way out, which they can't because they're running out of ammunition and fuel, they're absolutely stuck. I mean, it's another of these last stands. Like Leglis and all the others. It's absolutely hopeless. And, 116th Panzer, which was north of 2nd Panzer, that's also coming, but that's also stopped at a village called Verdun, which is just to the east of Marche, also by the rail splitters. So it's a tiny little area there. It's on the main road leading into Marche. And, at this point, the Americans are in enough numbers that they can wait for the Germans to arrive and be ready for them. They're now dug in, and they've got plenty of fire support in the 2nd Armoured Division Hell on Wheels, and they've also got, tanks from 30 Corps and from the 3rd RTR. On Christmas Day, it's just more of the same. 2nd Armoured Division is into play. It's sort of pushing kind of eastwards, pushing from the north, but, on a line that's running sort of roughly east to west, down from the north into the Germans as they're arriving. The 4th Cavalry Group, remember them? From the Lossheim Gap and all the rest of it? They're now all as one and pulled back and they're now involved. You've got 84th Infantry Division, the rail splitters, to the north of the town of Buissonville. So 2nd Panzer is now completely isolated and cut off between the Meuse and Marche. with these armour columns sort of sweeping south to their east. You know, it's just shocking. But at the same time, the rail splitters are now holding blocking positions. This is the 84th Infantry, with armoured support and, of course, all the American artillery that there always is, against the Panzer Lehr and the 9th Panzer Division as they're heading from the southeast. You know, 116th Panzer loses all 9 panzers of 16th Panzer Regiment when it runs into Company B of the 771st Tank Battalion and infantry of the rail splitters. So again, what you're seeing increasingly is the Americans working in combined arms teams, you know, and very effectively. You know, I think it's really, really interesting how well these little American battle groups are kind of being pulled together. Then the Führer Begleitbrigade Brigade is brought into the picture on the 116th Panzer's right, but again, it gets absolutely nowhere. You know, and again, it's you know, these US combined arms teams are just too strong for the arriving Panzer units to have any impact whatsoever, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, fighting continues on the 26th and 27th of December. As the night for the Panzer Lehr finally kind of get into the battlefield, yeah, they're just hammered. I mean, Panzer Lehr gets as far as, you know, almost to Celle, but gets hit by Allied Yabos and gets no further. And that's it.
You see, obviously, you're not allowed to throw in the towel, are you? Is the thing. Panzer Lehr, they must know what's ahead of them. They must know that the Americans have sort of congealed things by now. I'm struck with 4th Cavalry Group as well, that, you know, they have that absolutely awful day at the start of all this battle. But then later on, they're just...
They've regained some balance.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that's not unlike Villers-Bocage, is it, in a sense? Which bit do you remember? Or what's the crucial engagement of this? That the opening day when the Americans are knocked off balance, or the bit where they regain it and regain it crushingly so?
Well, yeah, I mean, 26th, 27th December, so Boxing Day and the day after. Combat Command B of the 2nd Armoured, Hell on Wheels, spends a day just, you know, they're surrounded, KG Cockenhausen and KG Böhm in these woods. The Germans are desperately trying to hide in these woods, and they just pull just ever more shells onto them, absolutely hammering them. Cockenhausen and Böhm could do nothing about it because they've run out of everything. Yeah. So they're just sitting there taking it. Yeah. So on the 26th, Boxing Day at 3:30 p.m, 2nd Panzer Division headquarters orders the survivors to destroy any remaining vehicles they can and then break out. And they have to make 2 breakout attempts, one on the 26th, one on the 27th. But by the end of play, on the, you know, by darkness on the 27th, it's all over. And the Americans discover 150 tanks and vehicles in the woods. 448 POWs are taken, and only 600 men escape.
God.
And since they started, 2nd Panzer Division has been reduced from 150 panzers to 20.
Dear God. I mean, that's...
And that same day is when 9th Panzer finally gets there. You know, having battled away on these sort of chewed up roads and with fuel problems and supplies and all the rest of it. But by that point, it's been hammered as well, because it's just, you know, it's just been henpecked by Americans all the way.
They could join in with being smashed to pieces. I mean...
yeah, exactly. You know, and Yarbos and what have you. So when they get there, they're just attacked immediately by CCR and CCA of the Hell on Wheels division, and with help of the rail splitters pushing from the south. So they get there before they've had a chance to kind of recce the ground or anything. They're just straight into it. It's bam.
God, it's quite something, isn't it?
By this stage, by the 27th of December, both Manteuffel, who's the 5th Army, Panzer Army commander, and Myrtle, the overall commander, their attention is now turning to Bastogne, where the Bastogne is the last bastion of hope for the Germans, that they can salvage something out of this. So the Führer Begleit Brigade has been ordered to disengage and head for Bastogne, and so too have been the decimated 1st SS Panzer Division and the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division, who we will remember were right at the top. Yeah. I mean, 1st SS Panzer Division, that's Piper. Yeah. 3rd Panzer Grenadier was against the Elsenborn Ridge, but just to the west of the twin villages that we talked about in maybe episode 3. So that's where we're at. So I think we should probably take a break, shouldn't we?
Yeah. It's just all, though, getting your head round what they've done, what the Germans have done here. You have a strategic reserve, in effect, here, and you've just absolutely...
wasted it.
Maybe a thing to consider is, does this actually shorten the war, the Ardennes offensive, for the Allies? Because the Germans spend this now on something pointless, rather than actually knocking Allied plans off track or adding delay. What it actually does is it sort of clears the decks. German production is never going to be able to keep up with this sort of disaster, is it? And manpower isn't going to be able to keep up with this kind of disaster, and so on. And aside from that, you then also get the penny dropping with an awful lot of people that this is it. They're finished. that leads directly to some of the stuff that happens around the surrenders, particularly in Italy, with Wilf and Kaltenbrunner and all that. That's a thing to think about, isn't it? Does it change the course of the war in the opposite direction for the Germans and actually do the Allies a big favour in a mad way? Because after all, everything about this is mad. We'll take a break. We'll be back in a second. See you in a tick.
This episode is brought to you by Rakuten. If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of the hunt. But are you getting the thrill of the best deals? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love with the most savings and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Samsung, Expedia, and Sephora. And even stack sales on top of cash back. It's easy to use, and you get your cash back through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Komm du noch?
If you've heard that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
10 years from today, Lisa Schneider will trade in her office job to become the leader of a pack of dogs. As the owner of her own dog rescue, that is. A second act made possible by the reskilling courses Lisa's taking now with AARP to help make sure her income lives as long as she does. And she can finally run with the big dogs. And the small dogs, who just think they're big dogs. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/skills.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al-Murray and James Holland. Here we are. I think you could probably tell from that first half that the writing is not just that the writing's on the wall for the Germans. The writing was on the wall on the 16th of December, let's be honest now. The writing's absolutely everywhere. It's on the wall, it's on the ceiling, it's in the sky is actually the point.
Well, the 27th of December is an important day because it's a day where it's absolutely clear that this is no longer about containing the offensive, the German offensive from the Allied point of view. This is about how do you counterattack and get rid of the Bulge.
What do you do next? Yeah.
So, it's the counteroffensive, so it's what do you do next? And the focus for Americans is basically, first of all, they've got to widen the corridor from the south into the town of Bastogne. That's the first thing. So there's this narrow corridor up near the village of Assenoir through which the Third Army are sending men and troops from their Third Corps. Yeah. They've got to widen that and protect that and make sure that it doesn't get counterattacked. And they've got to work out how they're going to reduce the whole pocket, the whole bulge, really. So from the 27th onwards, it's both sides are kind of having a rethink. From the German point of view, it's okay, let's just put 6th Panzer Army onto the defensive. Clearly that one's gone nowhere. By that stage, even Hitler's given up hope of breakthrough, so he's now thinking about Alsace and Operation Nordwind against the 6th Army Group, which is a bit stretched as a result of the movement of Patton's Third Army pivoting north. So he's thinking about a smaller offensive further south. There's two pretty clear options for the Allies. One, which is a major pincer to trap the bulk of the German forces, with a Third Army driving in from Luxembourg to the south and First Army from the north. And this is suggested, again, by Patton, who's very keen on his pinching outs. But Ike and Bradley are against this. They just feel it's too risky in winter conditions on already badly churned roads. And Montgomery's also reluctant to go down that route. And, they're right, it's the truth of it. It might be boring, but, we've talked a lot about the difficulty of the roads. And don't forget, all these roads, it's not just the roads heading eastwards, it's also the roads heading from the west, because lots and lots and lots of American traffic has also been going down these roads and are churning them up as well. It's not churning up roads is not the preserve purely of the Germans. So, there was then this sort of, Lightning Joe Collins, who was the 7th Corps commander, who was in Guadalcanal and then came over and then was 7th Corps commander for Normandy and has been ever since. he's full of fighting talk. You know, he's cut from the same cloth as Patton, and you know, and he's arguing to sort of move straight away. And Monty says, "Well, let's just kind of absolutely make sure we've got all our ducks in a row in true Monty fashion." And Collins says, "No, I think we should be bold, and we should sort of pinch off the Bulge with a really big strike south with my corps." And Monty goes, "Joe, you can't supply a corps along a single road." And Collins goes, "Well, Manny, maybe you British can't, but we can." And I would argue, no, you can't. No. I mean, I just think he's wrong on that. Yeah. And, you know, because it is too much. He's never had to do this. You know, this is not like, you know, this isn't like the breakout from Operation Cobra in Normandy on the 26th of July, when Collins's corps kind of burst through and all the infantry kind of on tanks and stuff. Again, that was summer. And they were using multiple roads, not one road. You know, this is totally different. This is winter. It's icy. There's snow on the ground, blah, blah, blah. But there has been a dollop of snow by this point. You know, it's freezing cold. And, you know, it takes time to build up strength, bring more reinforcements in, and do it methodically and properly. Well, and you know, again, it's the unimaginative way, but it's definitely the right way for the time and conditions that they're coming up
also,
against.
what's the rush, actually?
There is no rush.
That's the thing.
You know, the war is not going to be over by Christmas, because Christmas has been and gone. Yeah. So just do it properly. You know, Germans aren't going anywhere. You know, they might be pulling back a little bit, but there's still going to be plenty of time to kind of trap them. I just think it's absolutely the right thing to do. To reorganise, bring in replacements, bring up ammunition, bring up fuel, make sure you've got enough shells so that every time you attack, you can do it with maximum amount of firepower. You know. And you know, it's interesting because the newly arrived 87th Golden Acorn Infantry Division joins Middleton's 8th Corps, as well as the 11th Armoured Division, nicknamed Thunderbolt. Also arriving is the 17th Airborne Division, also known as the
Golden Talons.
And, you know, they're moving from 18th Airborne Corps to 8th Corps on 3rd Army on Christmas Day. So all this takes time, you know, on these incredibly congested roads, which are already churned up. So I think it's absolutely the right decision to just take a breather. Everyone just kind of, you know, chip away at that corridor to the south, obviously, all the time. Keep sending it back to the Jerrys, to the Krauts. But when you attack and you're doing a proper counterattack, let's do it properly. No half-cocked stuff. It's freezing cold, by the way.
Yes.
The biggest dollop of snow comes on the 29th of December, and that's when it really absolutely is just a whiteout. And of course, this is a bit where Garnier's losing his leg in the woods at Foy. You know, they're just sat there in their shell holes being shelled all the time. Well, not all the time, but intermittently. But it's enough, and you're getting these tree bursts and all the rest of it, and it's all completely miserable. But that doesn't mean to say it's not the right decision to stay there and just hold the ground and just sweat it out, or freeze it out, whatever. You know, you don't understand that when you're in a freezing foxhole in miserable conditions.
No.
But actually, the whole situation is easy.
And then, on the 30th of December, though, the Führerbegleitbrigade are now at Bastogne. They're heading south. They've been heading south from the 28th, take over the sector around Cibre to the southwest of Bastogne, but they're smashed up by fighter bombers. And then we run into some of the sort of Reimer, who's the commander of the Führerbegleitbrigade. He's then unhappy about being put under the command of 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division. You know, so you've got the Germans all shaking fists at one another, but they're too late arriving anyway.
It's too little too late.
Too little too late. Yeah. Reimer's ordered to retake the Cibre on the 29th of December, but at the minute they...
Yeah, it's just to the southwest of Bastogne, Cibre.
So, but again, American artillery, which is the sort of unglamorous end of how they... You know, the air power is the sort of thing you can visualise, isn't it? The sky's clearing, the planes appear. The American artillery, which has been absolutely hammering the Germans, and their attack's broken up by that.
Well, I mean, you know, that landscape there is sort of, you know, it's still softly undulating, and there's a kind of there's some woods north of Cibre, and they emerge out of the woods coming down towards the village, and as they go into these kind of snow-covered fields, they just get absolutely hammered by the artillery. And of course, they haven't been painted white, and so they're very black on a white landscape against a black wood, and you know, they set out like sore thumbs, and you know, they're just absolutely hammered. I mean, it just can go absolutely nowhere. And you know, the artillery concentrations have been brought up for the expected Jerry counterattack here. You know, they're expecting it. You know, of course they are. So they're lying in wait ready, and this is why all this is so much harder now, because it's not them arriving and surprising an unprepared American defence. This is the Americans knowing exactly what they're dealing with, expecting the Germans to reinforce Bastogne, and being ready for them when they do arrive, and wham, you know, and there they go. So there's vicious fighting all that day of the 29th of December, this snow-covered day. But the casualties are appalling for the Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade. And that night, Reimer has to report that his force is far too weak to attempt any further assault. That's it. Over.
He's finished.
You know, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to have a renewed attempt to get into Bastogne from the southwest and also from the east. It just doesn't work. You know, and while this is going on, British Verdi Corps is extending its bulge of its own from the River Meuse down towards the village of Hotten. So it's sort of, you know, also it's still a little way from Bastogne, it has to be said, but even so, it's sort of, you know, hot on the tails. And at the same time, you know, they're attacking from the newly formed 39 Panzer Corps is attacking from the southeast at the same time as the FBB are kind of attacking from the west. Yeah. You know, it's another
bloodbath.
Maxwell Taylor's back, so he's back in charge of the 101st Airborne, but it's now minus 20.
Yeah.
You know, so all sorts of problems. Trench foot, frostbite, dysentery as well. The Christmas mail has arrived, which has done a lot for morale, and plus a supply of rations. But these guys are freezing, particularly the 101st Airborne, as we commented on in one of the earlier episodes. You know, arrived in Bastogne without all their winter kit. You know, there was such a hurry, they just jumped into the trucks before they kind of properly got themselves packed. And new supplies of Mackinaws and so on, these sort of winter coats are arriving, but it's kind of not really enough, to be perfectly honest. Patton comes to Bastogne on the 30th of December. That's really funny because he goes on a sort of tour of the area. He goes up to Raleigh where there was this fight, and there's an artillery observation officer up front with the 327th Clyde Infantry Regiment, and sees Patton and his entourage kind of walking quite open across this field, and yells at him to get the hell down. Then gives the order to fire for effect, and one of the rounds just by coincidence more than skill, lands right on top of a panzer, which sets off the ammunition, blasts the whole thing to pieces, sort of turret hurtling into the eye and all the rest of it. And Patton says, "Now, by God, that is good firing." And comes over, and of course the artillery observation officer is incredibly embarrassed. He's been yelling at Patton. Patton likes the cut of his jib, and it's all fine.
But what he's seeing there, isn't it, is sort of remnants of Führerbegeit Brigade, 3rd Panzer Grenadiers, a Kampfgruppe for 1st SS Panzer Division, 14th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, 167th Volksgrenadier, who've just arrived from Hungary, of all places, who are, you know...
and again, haven't got a clue what the lay of the land is.
Exactly, this absolute mixed bag attempt, again, to cut Bastogne off. And the 2 companies of the 35th Santa Fe Infantry Division are caught napping by this at dawn. It's interesting, isn't it, actually? Germans can still achieve surprise, but again, it's the American artillery, and they're using the posit fuse, aren't they, for the first time, which is the proximity fuse, which is the thing that will create an airburst for you.
I mean, imagine you're the 167th Volks Grenadier Division. You don't want to be conscripted in the first place. No. You've been in Hungary. Yeah. You've just got here on trains. You're just debussed. You get there, and the Americans use their brand new, state-of-the-art proximity fuses, shells on them, and you get absolutely cut to pieces. Yeah,
straight away. You've come from Hungary. You've come all this way. You'll have had all the things of coming to battle, the nerves, the stirring speeches, the last letters home, the entire thing, and you're done in the morning, basically.
Yeah, and the Waffen SS and the Fallschirmjäger are still having arguments, just like they were on the first night with Piper and what was it, the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, wasn't it? I think in Lossheim-Graben and all that. And Lanzarat. And this time, you know, the 1st SS Panzer Division blames 14th Fallschirmjäger Regiment for not being there and all the rest of it. Yeah. And, oh God, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And General Kokot, who's the overall commander of this battle, says, "These units, unduly boastful and arrogant anyway, with their total lack of discipline so typical of them, with their well-known ruthlessness combined with considerable lack of logic, had a downright devastating effect, and in all cases prove a handicap for any systematic conduct of fighting."
lack of logic is a...
It's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? So this is a Wehrmacht general talking about the 1st SS guys. You know, you don't need the Allies to fight. You're fighting amongst yourselves, aren't you?
Yeah, and this again is in stark contrast to the Americans. But that attack we were just talking about is scraped together from loads of different German units who are all falling out with one another. So the Americans are able to do this. You know, the homogeneity of the American army as an outfit, that you can do it. The Americans can do this thing that the Germans are incapable of. That for some reason in the post-war historiography, it's the Germans who get the credit for being able to do this.
Yeah.
A vast mystery. Anyway.
You know, there is still one big air battle.
Last gasp.
Or showdown. Last gasp to play out, which of course is Operation Bodenplatte, which is another ludicrous idea. But anyway, by the 1st of January, the Allies have flown 34,100 sorties. You know, that's a huge number. And the Luftwaffe in total have only managed 7,500. So it's an incredibly uneven balance sheet. Bodenplatte, 2 weeks late. This is supposed to have happened on day one. This is the massed sweep of every single fighter plane they can possibly get their hands on, including the Me-262, which is a jet aircraft, which is a fighter, but Hitler has decreed it's got to be a bomber. They don't have 2,000, they have 1,035. That's all they can manage. Yep. Still quite a lot, though, to be fair. And the aim is to hammer the Allied airfields and prevent them, catch them napping. And it does catch them off guard, to be fair. 144 British and American aircraft are destroyed on the ground and 62 more damaged. And another 70 lost in aerial combat that day. But a third of the Luftwaffe force is destroyed. 304 planes are shot down on that one day alone. It is just, raining aircraft plunging into the ground, including 85 by their very own flak. A total of 214 pilots and crew either killed or POW, including 3 Geschwader commanders, all 6 Gruppen commanders, and 11 Staffeln commanders, which is squadrons. Yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Yeah. So it is absolutely the last gasp, and that's that.
And a load of night fighters are on that sorting, aren't they? And are lost. Completely pointlessly. They punch a hole in their night defences doing that.
Yeah, and it's absolutely inarguable that life for Allied aircraft is considerably easier after Bodenplan. Yeah. Yeah, because there just aren't so many airplanes a day. This really is it.
I mean, that sort of illustrates the point I was making before the break. That whatever the Germans think they're doing, they're actually making life easier for the Allies, one way or another. Then there's the American offensive at Bastogne, which follows midnight on the 31st, the 1st of January 1945. Happy New Year, everybody. Bizori and Magaret are retaken by 6th Armoured Division. The 35th Santa Fe...
which is new. 6th Armoured Division, new to the battlefront, incidentally, taken over from the 10th. So, again, that pause has allowed that replacement of fresh units, letting the weary units go. Yeah. 35th Santa Fe Division really kicks into gear on the 2nd of January.
Yeah. And this then, this is Troy Middleton. It's from the west of Bastogne, driving northeast in a wide arc around the top.
Yeah, so it's the opposite direction from which the Führer Brigade were attacking on the 29th of December. And you've got 11th Armoured closest to the town, if I remember rightly, then the 17th Airborne, and then the 87th. No, maybe it's the other way around. I think it's the 11th are on the left-hand side, the western side, then the 17th are definitely in the middle, and then the 87th. They're sort of swinging up in a kind of northeasterly direction across the top of Bastogne. That's the idea.
Yeah. I mean, again, whatever's left of the Führer Brigade, I mean, it's the thing that they're now properly under the hammer, aren't they? It's difficult. 11th Armoured have a tough time. It's 6 miles in 4 days against those German formations. And they lose 660 casualties, 42 Shermans and 12 Stuarts, which shows going forwards is difficult. It doesn't matter who you are, going forwards is difficult, which I think also further underlines why you need to pause, why you need to gather your strength and get your ducks in a row before you try this, because it's difficult one way or another. And then on the 3rd as well, 1st Army plus 30 Corps, they open their own assault from the north of the Bulge, attacking in the southeast direction. 7 Corps leading in the centre towards Houffalize, 30 Corps on the right flank, 18th Airborne Corps on the left. So they get motoring too, and
creating their own little bulge.
Yeah, so there's a counter bulge,
and they're sort of sweeping down in a kind of a southeasterly direction.
And this is
from the north.
I mean, the thing is, that's on the 3rd. The day before, Manteuffel has asked Model to be able to withdraw, and of course, the boss Hitler says, no, I want to counter thrust on the 4th, please, day after tomorrow. Doesn't work. On the 4th, that's the day when there's no more German forward movement. And Manteuffel afterwards says, that's the day the campaign was lost. But I mean, I think if you've got this far listening to us, we would suggest it's lost before it begins. I mean, there is no campaign at this point. There's a series of scrappy, uncoordinated actions. Yep. Units, having fought desperately to go west, now fighting desperately to get east. There isn't a campaign present and correct at this point, is there?
No. Anyway, on the 5th of January, Model is finally forced to pull his panzer divisions from Bastogne, after all. And, they need to be sent back to kind of sort of reinforce 6th Panzer Army, which is now being pressed very heavily by the US 1st Army. So that's it. No more attempts on Bastogne. It's still snow everywhere. The conditions are absolutely brutal. Yeah. Only on the 8th of January does Hitler authorise the full withdrawal, but largely because of weather and shortage of fuel, etc. It doesn't happen anything like as quickly as planned. And 7th Corps, Lightning Joe Collins' 7th Corps, managed to take the village of Roche before the Germans had left. Right. The plan had been to let 5th Panzer Army take over those positions of 6th Panzer Army in a sort of gradual retreat. So basically 5th Panzer Army would cover retreat of 6th Panzer Army, and that's just not possible because now 5th Panzer Army is fully engaged where it is.
Yeah.
So, everyone's sort of fleeing, basically.
12th
of January, Red Army launches its new offensive in the east, so there's absolutely nothing left now. I mean, it's like Nordwind, which has been launched on the against 6th Army Group down further to the south. That's happened on the 3rd of January. That's also running out of steam as well, very quickly. And on the 14th of January, von Rundstedt, who's still overall Commander-in-Chief of OB West, which is the overall High Command in the West, pleads with Hitler to be allowed to retreat to the Rhine, and Hitler refuses. Of course he does. He says you can only retreat as far back as the West Wall, which is where they started.
Jesus Christ.
16th of January, US 1st and 3rd Armies finally meet, do kind of air punches at one another at Houffalize. And then finally, on the 28th of January, the last bit of lost ground is taken. And so that is the Battle of the Bulge. Finally over. Like so much the Second World War. The decision has happened much earlier, but because of the way the Germans are committed to fighting to the bitter end, it's more than a month later that the battle itself ends, but it's the decision is made on the first couple of days, isn't it, really? The first day. Well, Jim, I mean, we've got to the end of the Battle of the Bulge, but the problem here is really there's still tons more to talk about. And what we probably want to do is a bit of a wash-up, talk about what conclusions can be drawn. I think drawn quite a few as we've gone, but there's still plenty to talk about. And I think really... Yeah, I'd like to talk a bit more about the combined arms of the Americans and what they're doing. And I think there's definitely a chunk to be said on American artillery as well, which I think is sort of key to the whole thing.
So what we'll do is we'll do another episode. I'm sure along the way as well, in your listening to this, there'll be some questions raised. So maybe as you react to the series as it goes out, and you've got to the end here now, so well done you. You now know your rail splitters from your golden lions, from your golden talons to your whatever. I mean,
to your hell on wheels.
Exactly. Anyway, we will do a mop-up episode. Thanks very much for listening. Obviously, you can subscribe and listen to all of this stuff in one giant ad-free lump if you go to our Apple channel and become officer class. You could subscribe to our Patreon, join the independent company over on Patreon, and you can come to We Have Ways Fest in September the 12th to the 14th of this year at Black Pit Brewery. wehavewayesfest.co.uk. Tickets selling nicely, speakers lined up, ideas forming. But I think this has been absolutely brilliant to do, Jim. You've done an amazing job putting this together. And it's really interesting coming at a battle that neither of us were particularly familiar with, right? Because it maybe makes you
it's been amazing.
Think differently about or come at it a little differently to some of the ways it's been talked about before. But we'll get round to that. Thanks, everyone, for listening to episode 8 of Battle of the Bulge from We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. Cheerio!
Cheerio!